What happens when a teenage girl is crowned queen, but never truly rules? How does a name etched in royal bloodline become a symbol of betrayal, faith, and tragedy? She ruled for just 9 days, yet her story has lived for nearly 500 years. This is not just the story of a queen, it is the fall of innocence, the weight of royal blood, and the brutal truth of power in Tudor England. This is the story of Lady Jane Grey. To uncover the truth behind the crown, watch till the end. Welcome to Rise and Fall of Nations, and let's begin. Lady Jane Grey was born in October 1537 into a world where being close to the throne was both a privilege and a curse. Her father, Henry Grey, was the Duke of Suffolk. Her mother, Lady Frances Brandon, was the niece of King Henry VIII, making Jane a cousin to his children, Edward VI, Mary and Elizabeth. From the beginning, Jane was no ordinary noblewoman. She was raised in a deeply Protestant household during a time when the Reformation was tearing Europe in two. Her education was exceptional. Jane could speak Latin, Greek, and Hebrew and studied philosophy and theology from a young age. Her letters reveal a sharp intellect, a firm moral compass, and a quiet, pious spirit. But beneath the elegance of her upbringing, ambition stirred. Jane's parents, especially her father, were determined to secure power, and her royal blood made her a political asset in a kingdom where the throne was constantly under threat. By 1553, the young King Edward VI, Jane's cousin and fellow Protestant, was dying. At just 15 years old, he had no children, and the legal heir to the throne was his Catholic half-sister Mary Tudor. But Edward and his advisers feared that Mary would undo the Protestant reforms and return England to the authority of the Pope. Enter John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, Edward's most powerful adviser and one of the most ambitious men in England. Dudley had recently married his son, Guildford Dudley, to Lady Jane Grey. Now, with Edward dying, he proposed a daring plan bypass Mary and Elizabeth entirely, and named Jane, a committed Protestant, as Edward's successor. Some say Jane was a willing participant, others say she was forced. But one thing is clear, she was only a teenager, and the throne was being thrust upon her. Edward died on July 6, 1553. 4 days later, Jane was proclaimed Queen of England. She fainted when she heard the news. Jane was moved to the Tower of London, the traditional residence of monarchs before their coronation. But even as she signed letters as Jane the Queen, the foundations of her rule were crumbling beneath her. Mary Tudor was not idle. Declaring herself the rightful heir, she began rallying support in the countryside, and to the surprise of many, the English people, tired of religious instability and suspicious of Northumberland's plot, supported her. Mary promised legitimacy, stability, and a return to the old faith. Just 9 days after Jane had been proclaimed Queen, the Privy Council, the same one that had once supported her, reversed course and declared Mary the rightful monarch. The people cheered. Mary entered London in triumph. Lady Jane Grey, just 16 years old, was now a prisoner in the same tower where she had briefly lived as queen. At first, Queen Mary showed mercy. She may have seen Jane as a victim, not a threat, a puppet in the hands of ambitious men. Jane was charged with treason, but not immediately executed. She remained imprisoned, held under watch, but treated with a certain degree of respect. But in early 1554, Protestant rebels led by Sir Thomas Wyatt rose against Mary in what became known as Wyatt's Rebellion. The uprising was crushed, but its aftermath was devastating, especially for Jane. Though she had played no part in the rebellion, her name was still used by Protestant plotters, and she remained a powerful symbol of resistance to Mary's Catholic rule. Queen Mary, under pressure from her advisers and her soon-to-be husband Philip of Spain, made a terrible decision. To secure her throne, she signed Jane's death warrant. On the morning of February 12, 1554, Jane Grey was led to Tower Green. She was calm. She carried a prayer book. Her final words were simple and heartbreaking. "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." At the time of her death, she was 16 years old only. Lady Jane Grey ruled for only 9 days, but her legacy has endured far beyond the brief moment she held power. She is remembered not just as a queen, but as a martyr, a symbol of innocence caught in a storm of politics, religion and betrayal. Some historians argue she was a victim, others see her as a player in a dangerous game, but all agree her story is one of the most tragic in English history. Paintings and books would later romanticize her, the pale, stoic girl standing before the executioner, the prayer book clutched in trembling hands. Yet beyond the romantic image was a real girl, brilliant, devout, and doomed from the moment she was born into royalty. Her story reminds us that even in the grand narratives of kings and empires, it is often the quietest voices, the ones history tried to silence, that echo the loudest. Lady Jane Grey never sought the throne, but for 9 days she wore a crown that would cost her everything. Her rise and fall were not the result of her ambition, but the ambitions of others. And so her story remains one of the most powerful cautionary tales in the history of monarchy. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more powerful stories from Rise and Fall of Nations.